This is SLAYsmr, an ASMR channel where every week I whisper to you all about a different horror movie that I love. Before we get into this week's movie, I think I owe a little bit of an apology, a little bit of an explanation. I was going strong and steady with the channel through the holidays, and as I promised, I know that December was supposed to be a different Christmas, holiday, Yuletide themed horror movie every week, and we did that for half the month, right? We did Krampus and Gremlins, and when I did record a video for the third film, which I'm not going to spoil here because maybe we'll still do it next year. I did it and I left my heater on, and so there was a really bad buzz under the whole thing, and I meant to re-record it that week, and I kept pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back, and as things tend to happen in life, I just didn't end up doing it, and then soon enough the holidays were over, and I felt bad about the whole thing. I felt like I had failed on my promise to myself and to you all to do a new video every week. And then some personal things happened, nothing too hectic or life-threatening or anything like that, but just some things that my family and I had to take care of, and time got away from me. And here we are, I guess about, 2.5 months since my last video. So I'm sorry. I want to apologize for that. I know some of you have been asking. I really appreciate you asking. I appreciate you wanting another video. That's what inspired me to come back a little bit. I was going to come back anyway, but it was actually motivational to see people asking for new videos, so thank you for that. And thank you for getting me over 100 subscribers. Go figure, it happened when the channel wasn't at its most active, right? So thank you for being here. Thank you for coming back. I don't want to say that's the last time that will ever happen. You know, everyone has lives outside of this, and I feel like every ASMR artist that I follow had some point where they went a really long time without making videos. Artists who are at a much higher level than me. I remember when Raffy Taffy had a bit of a hiatus, and I was one of the people. I was like, where are the videos? Where are the videos? I need to get relaxed. So anyway, I don't want to say it will never happen again, because it does happen, but I am sorry it happened this time, and I'm sorry the wait took so long. I am serious about this channel, and I'm very glad to be back with you all talking about some more horror movies, so thanks for being here. So, because of my unintentional hiatus, and because the very first film that we covered for this channel was the original Halloween, I thought after our break we would come back and do Halloween again. And by Halloween I of course mean Halloween 2018, or as my friends and I like to colloquially call it, Halloween. That's what we call it on the Halloweenies podcast to differentiate it from John Carpenter's Halloween. This of course is called Halloween because it is directed by David Gordon Green, written by David Gordon Green, Danny McBride, and Jeff Fradley. Those of you who know the podcast might be surprised that I'm covering this movie because my introduction always says I talk about a different horror movie that I love every week, right? And if you listen to my original coverage of the film back in 2018 where it came out, I covered it on the Halloweenies podcast. I think I was the first out of all of them to see it because I was living in Austin, Texas at the time, and it didn't premiere at Fantastic Fest, which is the annual genre fest there at the Alamo Drafthouse. It premiered, I wanted to say, at the Toronto Film Festival, but then it came to Austin a few weeks later, in September, so I saw it about a month before it came out. And if you listen to that episode, like a lot of people, I had very mixed feelings when I first saw it that I'll get into once we start talking about the film itself. but there's been a joke amongst myself and all the other Halloweenies about how, despite my initial misgivings about the movie, I kept watching it. I kept coming back to it. I bought it on Blu-ray when it came out. I still ended up seeing it, I think, 4 or 5 times in the theater. And they all like to say that I forced myself to like it, or I convinced myself to like it. And I don't think that's true. I think seeing it the first time was so loaded for me because I had the podcast. Halloween, the original Halloween, is my favorite movie of all time. We had just been waiting and waiting for this, especially after Rob Zombie's Halloween films. And like any horror franchise that's been around for a while, you would keep hearing about all these reboots or sequels that would start up and then just not happen. I'm actually reading a book right now called Taking Shape 2. There's a Taking Shape 1, which is all about the production of the entire Halloween series, but Taking Shape 2 is actually about all of the different Halloween sequels or Halloween stories that never took place, that maybe got written or got put about halfway into development or partway into development and then got canceled for whatever reason. So I think because of all of that waiting, and because I love Halloween so much, I feel like I went into the movie wanting it to be a certain way, and in some aspects it was. But then, you know, the filmmakers put their own stamp on it. They diverted, and there's some very strange and bold choices in this film, which we'll get to. And I think because it wasn't quite what I was expecting or wanting, I had a really strong distaste for some of those choices when I first saw it, to the point where it was maybe overwhelming all the things I love about the film. And I really do believe in true and strong criticism. There are too many critics out there, I think, who are just trying to get in with filmmakers or get swag or whatever else. I don't want to get too spiteful or mean on the podcast, but I do think film criticism in many ways can be a dying art form, at least in the volume that we used to have it at. I think people are afraid to criticize movies sometimes, and there is still much that I do criticize about this movie, but I think after a certain number of times of watching it, I felt like I was finally able to meet the movie on its own terms and accept its flaws and still accept all the things that I love about it as well. It's only gotten better for me the more times that I've seen it, and I was so bummed when Halloween Kills, the sequel to it, got canceled last year. And I think that was a sign for me, okay, maybe you do actually really like Halloween. Hopefully we'll get Halloween Kills in theaters this October. I think it will happen. Things look pretty decent on the COVID front, especially with the third vaccine. I'm really hoping theaters can be at full operation by the end of summer. Some of them are at full operation, but you know, with people actually going to them. And if that happens, I'm really, really hoping to see Halloween Kills in a theater. If Fantastic Fest happens, maybe even traveling back to Austin to see it, because I'm sure we'll have some kind of advanced premiere there. So that's a little bit of background on why it might seem like I'm pivoting on Halloween 2018, and I suppose I am pivoting in a way, but I do want to talk about some of my criticisms about the film too. One last thing about that, I think partly why I came around to it as well is because Danny McBride and David Gordon Green have been very open in interviews about there were certain things they just wanted to try, and maybe they didn't get everything 100% right, and they wanted to see if they could earn the satisfaction of fans, if they could earn that sequel, and if so, really see what might be perfected in the other two movies. And that made me respect them a lot. I don't think they're out there going, no, this is the definitive Halloween, all the other ones are crap, this is the way you do it, our movie is perfect. I don't think they look at it at all. I think they look at it like a genre movie they love, in a series they love, and maybe it has some flaws. And it's so hard with films sometimes too, because you may be shooting something and you think it's working really well, or editing something and you think it works really well, and then you put it out to fans and maybe they're not so hot on it. So all of that over the past almost 3 years now has really made me appreciate the film a lot more. Alright, so let's get into it. I definitely want to talk about the first time I saw this movie, aside from the opinions on it, just the experience of it, because it's something that's so vivid. And I don't know about you, but I find myself just really longing for times where I can be in spaces, physical spaces with other people, like going to the movies. An event like Fantastic Fest could not happen right now, nor should it, at least not in person. It happened virtually, I think, this year or last year. So I think that's already colored in this really wistful, nostalgic lens for me, because I remember I was in grad school at the University of Texas at Austin. I had to pass the Fantastic Fest badge to go cover this, and I think they ended up playing it in, I want to say, 4 or 5 of the theaters in the Alamo Drafthouse, South Lamar. And I was there with friends, a few friends from out of town. My friend Matt Elliott, who is a big supporter of the Losers Club and Halloweenies. Matt, if you're watching, remind me, was that the first time we met in person? I can't remember. Was it after that? I don't remember. Anyway, I do know that Matt was at Fantastic Fest, and Matt actually gave me this shirt. I don't know if you can see it on the frame. It's a Michael Myers shirt. So I have memories of friends wanting to get into the movie. My friend Martin, I remember, who was there writing for other publications, he was there too. There was just this buzz in the air, and while everyone was in line for the film, someone in Michael Myers, in the new Michael Myers mask, the decade-aged Michael Myers mask, came out to the front of the line and just started walking around, and he looked really good. He had the silent Michael Myers gait down really well. They had put something in the mask so that you couldn't see his eyes. It really looked like Michael Myers. So I stood next to him. I have a picture next to him, and it's always a running joke with me how scared I am of Michael Myers. Even in a non-scary setting, I was in a film line with hundreds of other people around. It wasn't like he was stalking me through a dark alleyway. It was just a guy playing Michael Myers and me standing next to him, but I was genuinely scared, and something about the image of Michael Myers, just that blank white face, really scares me. So that was really fun. And then of course we went in, we saw the movie. I'll get into the movie in a second. And I remember my friend Martin and we both had mixed feelings at the time about it, so we went across the street to a bar just so we could talk about the movie for a couple hours, and we went on and on. It was a school night for me, so I went back. I don't think I was writing a review for it, but I just was texting the other guys on the Halloweenies pod, and I had to come back the next day to Fantastic Fest to the press screening of Suspiria, the Suspiria remake, which was at 9 a.m. in the morning. Which, that's a hell of a movie to see at 9 a.m. in the morning. I love that movie, but it's long, it's dense, it's complicated, it's psychological. So I'm taking the bus there. I'm already really tired because I had homework and I knew I would have class later in the day. Plus I had stayed up really late going to this Halloween screening and talking about it afterwards. I get into the Alamo Drafthouse. Now, if you've ever been to the Drafthouse, you know that at a lot of the locations they set up these kind of interactive displays for movies that just came out. So at the South Lamar Alamo Drafthouse the night before, they had the closet set up where Michael Myers springs out while Vicky is babysitting and he kills her. It's a really, at this point, I think a pretty famous scene, both in the film and in the preview. So the night before they had the closet set up, it was just the open closet door and that was it. So, it's 9 a.m. I'm walking in. I think there were maybe 5 or 10 other people in the building. There weren't a ton of critics there to see the 9 a.m. screening of Suspiria. I think they were going to try their luck with one of the other screenings later in the day. I walk in, I've got my coffee, I walk past this closet, this replica from the movie. I feel like I have to look in just because, just make sure Michael Myers isn't there. I'm expecting it to be empty, and I look in, and Michael Myers is there. I jump, I drop my coffee. And of course, it was just a mannequin with the Michael Myers mask, but it wasn't there the night before. So it was almost like that scene in the movie, this idea of a closet that was empty a couple scenes ago. You go in, you check it, you expect it to be empty again, and it's not, and I was so scared. So even though I was ragging on the movie at that point, I feel like it was already working its magic a little bit and making me more frightened. Alright, so we've talked about how my feelings have evolved about this movie over time. So let me just give an overall assessment of what I love about it, and these are things that I've loved from the beginning. First off, the score. I think this was John Carpenter's first time coming back since Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, and what I really love about it is that, yeah, he's using his Halloween motifs. You hear a little bit of Laurie's theme, you of course hear the Halloween theme, but in the interim between Halloween 3 and this, he had started making these albums called Lost Themes that were essentially themes for movies that were never made. He made 2 albums of this. He just came out with the 3rd one, although it's called something else. I think I could be wrong. Maybe it's just called Lost Themes 3. And in that time, he was working with his son Cody Carpenter and his friend Daniel, and I felt like they were adding a little bit more muscle to John Carpenter's music, and they were bringing it into the 21st century, maybe in a way it hadn't been before. I love John Carpenter's old scores. We just watched In the Mouth of Madness for the Losers Club podcast, and I love the score to that. It's almost like his version of Enter Sandman by Metallica, but there's a bit of a dated quality to some of it. And with these new musicians, I felt like he kept his same stark, minimalist, synth stinger aesthetic, but then really beefed it up with some more contemporary guitars and drums and everything. And I think the movie handles that perfectly. One of my favorite things is, and I remember getting chills in the theater seeing this, is when the Universal Studios logo came up. And as the camera's panning across the globe, we just hear this low drone effect. And it doesn't even go into a Halloween theme, it's just this ominous drone as we go to Smith's Grove Sanitarium, and we see Michael Myers and the 2 podcasters want to go interview him. And of course, Dr. Sartain, the new Loomis. We'll talk about him, don't worry. And I almost feel like that drone, accompanied with James Jude Courtney, who I think is a fantastic Michael Myers for a few reasons. A, he's not too big. I mean, he's a tall, fit guy, but he's not like a Terminator. He looks like an old man, to an extent, a healthy old man, but an old man the same age Michael Myers would be. You don't ever see his face full on, but I feel like he's able to capture a quiet kind of rage in his eyes, or should I say his eye, because another great detail about this movie is that they pay attention to the mythos, to the fact that Michael Myers got his left eye gouged out with a hanger in the first Halloween. So, the way James Jude Courtney carries himself mixed with this drone, I do feel like right off the bat, they instilled Michael Myers with a sense of dread that he hadn't had in a while. And I think that's because, let's face it, Halloween Resurrection, just not very scary. The Rob Zombie films, I think because they dove too much into the background of the childhood of Michael Myers and they let him have dialogue, it maybe stripped him of some of that just empty, ominous dread that he has. It made him too much of a character, not enough of a cipher or a shell or a reflection of our nightmares. And so right off the bat, thanks to the music, thanks to the performance of James Jude Courtney, we get that. Also, too, I don't know how intentional this is. I'm going to say it is intentional because David Gordon Green, although he's helmed a lot of blockbusters at this point, you know, he cut his teeth on indie dramas and really thematically rich material. They show a lot of clocks in this movie. They show a clock ticking in the beginning. They show this record player spinning around. The movie does have a sense of history, and I don't know, I always look at a focus on time as being really ominous. This idea that Michael Myers is like time. He's forever. He is unforgiving. He's unstoppable. And he's going to come for all of us, right? The clock is going to count down, tick down to all of us. And they show that clock. I believe it's the first shot of the movie. So I do think the movie establishes its tone and its atmosphere really well right away. And I would say most of the misgivings I have with the film, I think, are moments when I feel like maybe it does divert from that just a little bit. I'm not against there being humor in a Halloween movie. After all, the first one has a lot of humor. Not a lot, but it has some humorous moments with Dr. Loomis telling Lonnie Elam to get your ass away from there. And some of the dialogue between Linda Laurie and Annie is pretty funny. I think with David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, who I love some of their comedic material. I love Eastbound and Down, and I actually like a lot of their, I guess for lack of a better word, stoner comedy. But I think maybe the sense of humor feels a little bit stoner comedy in the movie sometimes. The big one I can think of is later on in the film when Michael Myers kills the two policemen who are camping outside of Laurie's compound. One of them is actually the makeup artist for the film, I believe. We get to know them inside their police cruiser for a little bit, and they're just having small talk. They're talking about what they packed for dinner, and they have this argument over banh mi sandwiches, and I will say this, their discussion at the time when I saw it really made me want a banh mi sandwich. I think I got one the next day, but that's not the point. I think for me is that the film's trying to give them individuality and give them characteristics, but for me it just feels a little tonally off. It's just a little too goofy. That's an example of when the movie diverts from that ominous tone I just mentioned. But for this first, I would say half of the movie, we are in Dreadland. We're in full on worrying about Michael Myers as an external force, through the eyes of Laurie Strode, of course, because a lot of other people don't view him as being as much of a threat anymore. And I always say this, any horror movie, not just Halloween, any horror movie gets big points for me for atmosphere. You can have flaws in your film, but if you nail the atmosphere, especially with the Halloween movie, especially with Haddonfield, then I'm automatically going to be hooked, and I think I'm going to be forgiving of some of the other mistakes or flaws in the movie, because at the end of the day, with a well-tread world like Halloween, like Haddonfield, I just like living there. I like roaming around there the same way. I'm somewhat forgiving of the Hobbit movies for Lord of the Rings, which are not as good as the original trilogy. I just like spending time in that world. I feel that way about Star Wars. I feel that way about the Dark Knight trilogy. All of those films. I mean, any film has its flaws, right? But certain places I just always want to go back to. And Haddonfield is one of those places. And I feel like this movie does get Haddonfield right. Even though it looks a little bit different, obviously, than from the 70s. They didn't film it in South Pasadena. I think keeping budget in mind, I think they went to Wilmington, North Carolina, which is obviously a lot different, but, the movie looks cold, it looks wet, it looks autumnal. I live in Atlanta now, and I have to say, Atlanta, despite being in the South, is actually a lot more seasonal than I thought it was going to be, and I'd imagine that's even more so for North Carolina, and I think that shines through in the movie. Yeah, we don't see the hedge, we don't even see the Myers house. I have a feeling we will in Halloween Kills. We don't see a lot of the locations from the first movie, but it does still have that small town spooky feel. So, this film also is a lot about PTSD, and this is one of the misgivings I also had when it came out. I'm a huge fan of Halloween H2O, and I actually think Halloween H2O deals with PTSD and alcoholism and all the other obstacles and personal demons that Laurie Strode is struggling with really well. And of course the movie wrote off everything from Halloween 2 onward. It only considers the first Halloween as being canon. And like a lot of fans, I think I was up in arms about that, especially because Jamie Lee Curtis was involved with Halloween H2O. She did an Entertainment Weekly cover on Halloween H2O. When that movie came out, she was singing its praises and talking about how much she loved it and what it did for the character of Laurie Strode. And then when they decided to retcon that, she backpedaled a little bit, as did a lot of the other creators, saying that they only did it for the money and it wasn't a worthy film and blah blah blah. I've since learned to soften on that viewpoint. I don't think there's any reason for me to get that angry about that. I didn't make Halloween H2O. It's not insulting to me. I don't even think they meant it to be insulting, but I felt like at the time it was maybe disrespecting the series, the hard work from the other folks in the series, and once again, I love Halloween H2O. But then I was listening to the Psychoanalysis podcast, which is run by some friends of mine, and they actually did an episode comparing the two films, comparing Halloween and comparing Halloween H2O. ago, and their read on it was that, yes, both films examine PTSD, both films examine alcoholism to an extent, and how we maybe pass these fears and paranoias and our own demons onto our children, but they handle it in different ways. And that made sense to me. And then I started to think, with Halloween, a franchise that now has been out for, 40 years, over 40 years at this point, I think at a certain point, as a fan, you can't get too protective of the series. You can't hold on to it too tightly, because as long as it makes money, it will continue to have sequels and get remade time and time and time again. And I've almost started looking at it like comic book movies, like the DC universe at this point has, I want to say, 3 different timelines going on. You have the Arrowverse, you have the extended universe, then you have the standalone films like the Joker. And that doesn't bother me because those properties have been around forever. The characters are almost like fairy tales. They're not public domain, but you get what I'm saying. It doesn't feel weird to me when people want to do different things with the DC universe, and I've started to look at the Halloween universe like that too. Once David Gordon Green completes his trilogy, who knows, some other filmmaker might come along and retcon that trilogy and tie all the films together, do an Into the Spider-Verse kind of thing that doesn't ignore any of the films, and that would be okay too. So I think once I started looking at the franchise with a lot more flexibility, I really came to appreciate what Laurie Strode and Jamie Lee Curtis does in this film. I'm not the first one to make this comparison, but she's a little bit more of a steely Sarah Connor type. It is kind of strange in that she is right in the movie. It's weird because I feel like the movie doesn't want to condone how she raised her daughter, right, played by Judy Greer. And that's how that's affected there. Her granddaughter, Judy Greer's daughter. So it wants to do that, but then at the same time, Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode's training for them pays off at the end, right? That's how they managed to defeat, and I say defeat in quotes because he's still out there. That's how they managed to get the jump on Michael Myers. But then I also love that both of those things can be true. It can be true that over the years, Laurie Strode has not been a good mother, has not been a good grandmother, and that she was also right in all of her doomsday preparation. I like those contradictions. That to me makes for good storytelling. I like that characters can have complications like that and paradoxes. So every rewatch I've had, I've really enjoyed what Jamie Lee Curtis is doing. And then I will say too, if we just want to talk about a theme aside, my own contextual feelings about the Halloween series aside, I really, as I said, the movie gets Michael Myers right as far as his mood and movement goes, but it also gets the kills right. So if we're just talking about it as a pure balls to the wall, white knuckle, thrilling horror movie, for the most part, I think the film does that really well. The way we see him at the gas station once he escapes from the bus, it's in the periphery. When we first see him kill that little kid and his dad, it's an homage to Annie getting killed in the car, but it is also almost like a restaking of, no, Michael Myers is in the bathroom. He is in the bathroom at the gas station in the background. He doesn't need to move super fast. He's in the periphery. It really is kind of, I think, taking back some of that fast, multiple, non-stop stab wound feeling of the Rob Zombie films. So we see him in the car, we see him at the gas station. That scene inside the gas station is terrifying, and once again, because although the movie is pretty gory, it does show a decent amount of gore at certain points, there are also a lot of kills that are off screen. All the people on the bus, the policemen who get killed, or the bus drivers, we don't see them get killed. We don't see the kid's father get killed. We don't see the 2 gas station attendants get killed. We see the podcasters get killed. We see Michael go on this awesome single shot rampage through Haddonfield that has a lot of homages to the past series. We don't see Dave get killed, who's Vicky's boyfriend. So I feel like the movie weirdly does have a sense of restraint about it, even though it does show some pretty gory deaths. And on one hand, you could say, oh, that Michael Myers doesn't kill that many people if they're just going off of the first film, where he only killed a handful of folks. Why is he going on this rampage, killing, close to a dozen or however many now, and why is he doing it so much more violently than before? But he's been locked away for a really long time. I think he has a lot of rage in him. I think when he comes back to Haddonfield, that does things to him. It makes his style get a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more grotesque. So I really do think once all that gets kicking, once again, it just feeds into him being scary, and it does a really nice trick of allowing him to be slow and methodical at certain points and then just unleash at other points. I actually feel like this film blends that, for lack of a better word, killing aesthetic better than any of the other movies have since then. It's almost like he's able to be Jason and a Terminator at the same time, if that makes sense. We talked about that closet kill. I'm trying to think. I feel like the gas station is actually the creepiest to me because it's all in broad daylight, and because of the original Halloween, daylight kills always freak me out. Just the idea that the thing that you're afraid of can be hiding in plain sight. And I also weirdly think that Michael Myers is almost just as scary when he's in his hospital scrubs as when he's got the jumpsuit. And I like at the gas station that we're really seeing just this almost white ghost go in the background. And as I said before, James Jude Courtney actually has a pretty menacing face, and so even though we don't see all of it, I think his face is almost just as scary without the mask. So I like the gas station sequence a lot. I actually think the most horrific murder in the film is Oscar, who is Jude Greer's daughter, Allison, Laurie Schertz's granddaughter. She is at the not the prom, I guess the Halloween dance, and gets into a fight with her boyfriend, Connor. I'm thinking in Terminator Land too much. Cameron, who's actually the son of Lonnie Elam, the kid who Loomis tells to get his ass away from the Myers house in the first movie, and I think he's actually going to be a pretty major character in Halloween Kills, the upcoming sequel. They get into a fight, and she runs away from the dance, and Cameron's friend Oscar, who's kind of like I hate to use the word, but incel, male entitled, thinks he's a nice guy type of dude who thinks I think he is owed physical affection from Allison simply because he's walking her home. He walks her home, he puts the moves on her, she runs away from him. He finds himself in Mr. Elrod's yard. Elrod, of course, being an homage to Halloween 2. And David Gordon Green has a lot of fun with Michael Myers stalking him with motion sensor lights. So the light comes on, Michael Myers just appears. I always love when Michael Myers just materializes like a spirit. The light goes out, he's in a different place, and kind of goes on like that for a while. And once again, it's that combination of slow until it isn't, of slow meets fast, of Michael Myers getting someone in a tight space, in a situation that they cannot get out of. And he, of course, does that to poor Oscar. He's almost coming closer and closer every time the lights go up until he's right there and he gets him and he impales him on a fence. I think that's the spookiest kill in the movie because it feels like out of all the kills, it feels like it's tied the most to the 70s film because of the speed of it, because of the peripheral nature of it. But then once again, it's bringing a technology update, it's bringing motion sensor lights, and it brings that 21st century speed to it. Once he's ready to kill Oscars, I feel like that's a perfect fusion of the two aesthetics that are going on in this film. Alright, but I told you we would talk about him. At the same time, I'm actually, even when I first saw it, I think I was 100% with the film all the way through Oscar's death. Then what happens is Michael Myers' current doctor, Dr. Sartain, who is, I'm probably gonna say his name wrong. It's a Halleck Bilgner. I don't know if I'm saying that right. He's playing him, and up until that point, I wouldn't even call him the new Loomis. He just feels like Michael Myers' doctor, right? And he treats Michael with more compassion than Loomis preferred to. Loomis, obviously, at a certain point, views Michael as pure evil, whereas Dr. Sartain wants to understand him, and that's all fine. I don't have a problem with that. That seems like pretty basic horror movie psychology 101. So he is accompanying Will Patton's character, Deputy Hawkins, who I love. I just love Will Patton, and I love Will Patton as a cop. I feel like he really just embodies that weary Midwestern feel. I love that we meet him and he's playing a pinball game at a gas station. That just feels like a very Haddonfield move to do. So Dr. Sartain, who's the only survivor from the bus, and we find out why soon, he's accompanying Hawkins around the streets trying to find Michael Myers. And Hawkins has a lot of guilt because he was the first responder to the scene in the original film and kept Dr. Loomis from shooting Michael Myers. And now, of course, he's wishing he had let him do it because a lot more lives would have been saved. So they spot Michael Myers and he mows him down. He mows him down, and this is where the movie really starts to lose me quite a bit. I shouldn't say that. This is, to me, the movie's biggest misstep, and I think when I saw it, it made it really hard to get past it. But as Hawkins gets out of the car and is going to shoot Michael, Dr. Sartain gets out and stops him. He takes his pen, which he's been carrying the whole movie, flips it open. It's kind of like a pocket knife, and he stabs Hawkins, presumably to death. I don't know if we're going to see if they're going to keep him alive for this next film, but he stabs him in the jugular and runs him over pretty badly, so I'd be surprised if he survived. But hey, stranger things have certainly happened in the Halloween series. And he puts on Michael's mask, and he goes into the back of the car, and he actually drags Michael's body in there and puts it next to Allison, who they're supposed to be escorting to Laurie's compound. He puts on the mask and he explains how he's always wanted to see what it felt like, and he wants that to give him some greater insight into what drives Michael, and he's hoping to reunite Laurie and Michael to get him to speak and to understand how these two might have a symbiotic relationship. Even though they're enemies, they might be surviving all these years so they can meet again. Like, certainly it's like a Batman Joker thing. One can't live without the other, right? Now, I will say this. I don't fundamentally have a problem with any of that. I think that's all pretty sound. I don't know if it's real psychology, but for a genre film, for a slasher film, it's more or less decent psychology. But it's all delivered to us in this one exposition dump. They front-loaded a little bit when Sartain is talking to the podcasters at the hospital, but just all comes out in this one big stream right after we've seen him put on Michael Myers' mask. And let's face it, he just looks kind of funny in Michael Myers' mask and has killed this deputy. It's just a lot to take in. And I read later on that the screenwriters and director, they had to figure out some way to get Michael Myers and Allison to Laurie's compound. Here's my issue with that. Michael Myers, to me, as John Carpenter once said, is like the wind. He can pop up anywhere. There is, even if he's not overtly supernatural, there's a supernatural air about him. And also, Halloween 1978 is very simple, right? And to me, I don't know why they just, if they invented all of this crazy plot twist just to get everyone in one place, what I say to that is, okay, why doesn't Hawkins just pick up Allison? He drops her off at Laurie's, and Michael just shows up. I buy that Michael would somehow get out there. I don't really need to have an explanation as to how Michael gets to this compound. He's Michael Myers, of course, he'll be able to find it. And then at that point, he could kill Hawkins if they wanted to. He could kill Ray, who was the father, played by Toby Huss. He could even kill those two Bon Me cops. But it just seems like it unnecessarily complicates and convolutes the film. That being said, being a writer myself, sometimes it's really easy for others to say, well, why didn't you do it this way instead? And it can be really hard to see that while you're inside something, writing it. And once again, the screenwriters have acknowledged that Sartain was a really polarizing plot point, and I don't think either of them have tried to say it was perfect. They recognize that it was a plot solution. And once again, it's so hard to make movies. It's so hard to revise. I know they went through a lot of different drafts of this, so it is easy for me, the critic, the viewer, to sit there and say you should have done it this way, or maybe this way would have worked better. Why didn't you simplify it? And so I guess what I'm saying is I almost don't want to put too much stock into my authoritative voice, because I'm not the one inside the film making it, but I do have a problem with it as a viewer. And I think when I first saw the film, it was really hard for me to come back from that, because then we get the Banh Mi cop scene right after that. It's just a lot of chaos in a really compressed amount of time, and a lot of soapy genre elements in a really compressed amount of time. I almost wonder if there's a way to tease all that out a little bit more. Maybe I would buy it, and maybe if Sartain didn't look so silly in that mask. But to the film's credit, and once again, this is something I've recognized more as I've gone on, once the third act starts, once we get to Laurie's compound, and it just becomes this cat and mouse game between Michael Myers and these three generations of women, I am all in. I really love the final confrontation between Michael and Laurie. I feel like it turns to both of the strengths they've established really well. I love the score that accompanies when they're in the basement. Michael Myers is wrenching this countertop from the basement entrance. I think that track on the album is called The Grind, because he's just grinding and moving these mechanisms, this machinery that attaches the countertop to the floor, and you almost don't hear it at first. It's this rumble. It's just going poo, 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 and it keeps getting louder, and that to me, once again, sonically just captures the feel of Michael Myers, this unstoppable force that starts off quiet and then gets loud once you realize it's too late. So I really, really love this third act. I just think it's a good fight scene. I love a really long, drawn-out fight scene where the stakes are really even. I guess Michael at that point has been wounded a little bit, but he's Michael Myers. He has a lot of strength over pretty much everyone. And Laurie has been planning for this the whole time, so I feel like they're pretty evenly matched, and I like that it goes back and forth. Apparently, the original ending was a little bit too one-sided. I think the fight, and you see some shots of this in the trailer, it happened in the yard rather than throughout the house, in the different rooms in the basement. And I think they pretty explicitly showed Michael Myers rising at the end. I think what happened was, I want to say Allison shot him with a crossbow after he had pretty almost mortally wounded Laurie, and that allows the women to get away. And I think in the middle of the credits, they showed Michael Myers setting up and leaning against a tree. I do think that logically makes a little bit more sense than what's in place. This idea of Laurie being wounded and them having to get out of there. In this film, Laurie is still wounded, but they've got Michael Myers trapped in the basement, and they turn on the flames. Now my thing is, after all these years, I don't buy that Laurie would just leave him in the basement and just assume that he burns. First off, there's a bunch of guns in the house. What they should have done is taken some of those guns and shot him through the bars, right? While he's cooking, just to ensure that he's dead. In the other ending, because it's in the front lawn and Laurie is so badly wounded, it makes sense to me that they would just shoot him and get out of there. So I actually think the original ending does benefit the attack and flee implications of the ending. It's funny too, because you see him burning and then they cut back to the staircase and he's not there, and I actually think that's a fairly smart way to handle it. They didn't know if the movie was going to be successful, of course, and I do feel like the film does work as a natural stopping point for this series, but also because they don't show a body, they can keep going, which of course they did because this movie was wildly successful. And if the trailers for Halloween Kills are any indication, he gets out of that basement pretty easily, I think. I'm assuming he wrenches off one of the bars because he's coming out of this burning house and holding some kind of thing that I'm guessing he'll put to good use as a killer. So, those are my long, rambling, somewhat tangential thoughts on Halloween 2018. Whenever I rewatch it, and I rewatch it a lot, as I said, I'm with it for that first, I would say, hour 10, hour and 15 minutes, and I'm like, man, what don't I like about this movie again? And then they get to Sartain, and as as I said, I think that could work for me if it was woven throughout the film a little bit more, and if we didn't just get this big exposition dump, or if the journey to Laurie's compound was a bit more streamlined. But even with that, that time-wise, that's just, I don't know, maybe a 5 or 10 minute stretch of the movie where it's kind of losing me, and then it all comes back together for me in that third act. So although it's not perfect, it really still does hit all of those spots for me of what makes a good Halloween movie. And if I can find joy in Halloween 5 and even parts of Halloween 4, which is still very good but definitely has flaws, and of course Halloween 6, which I actually love, if I can forgive some of the more outlandish cult elements of that film and the sluggishness of the climax, then I can get behind Halloween 2018, no problem. And at the end of the day, I love this movie. I love that it was made, and I'm really excited for the sequel. And hey, we take these things for granted, right? I was having a lot of criticisms about Halloween 2018 when it came out. I would kill to see that movie in theaters right now. I would kill to see Halloween Kills in theaters, metaphorically. I wouldn't really kill anyone, but I think COVID has just really made me realize I love going to the movies. I love going to horror movies. I miss going to horror movies. I've gone to a drive-in several times, but I miss sitting in a big packed theater and watching a film like Halloween 2018 and just really getting scared by it. At the end of the day, this film scares me, and that's what a horror movie should do. So I love it. It's a great film in my book, even with its flaws. So once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for tolerating my delay. Thank you for coming back if you're still with me after all this. I'm hoping to make this very regular again. Although I have to admit, I haven't planned out the schedule. I don't know what the next movie is going to be next week. I'll have to think about it. I've watched a lot of films in the interim, in the break. So I have some thinking to do on that. There's one franchise movie that's having a new installment soon. Maybe I should do, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to think about it, and I'll decide next week what we want to cover. I hope you're well. I hope you're safe. I hope you're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel for this pandemic and just the world in general. I think things are slowly getting better. I know things are slowly getting better, and I'm really excited to see where we're all going to be at by the time the summer hits. Hopefully back in a movie theater. I would really like that. So, until then, be well, stay safe, stay happy, feel your feelings, be honest with yourself, and don't have any nightmares, except for the good kind. We'll see you next time.